This will be followed by a panel discussion, a sustainable future powered by renewable energy. That is the title of the next panel discussion. Now we'd like to hear from the panelists on this subject. The next panel discussants, could you please go up on stage? Could we have a big round of applause for the panelists? Thank you. From here, we would like to have Professor Sayuri Shirai, Advisor for Sustainability Policy at the Asian Development Bank Institute. Professor Sayuri Shirai will be moderating. So over to you, Madam. Sayuri Shirai from Keio University. Today, toward the realization of sustainable, the future of renewable energy. That's the theme, and we'd like to have a panel discussion with the three panelists. We only have 55 minutes, and so we'd like to have you look at the screen for an introduction of the speakers. We'd like to directly ask questions to the speakers. The purpose of this panel discussion is such that there are three renewable energy, for penetration of renewable energy, the operating companies and the banks, what are they doing at the moment? What are the approaches they are taking? And that is what we'd like to hear about. And secondly, on renewable energy, in order to expand renewable energy-related businesses, what are the bars, the hurdles and challenges that you are seeing? And to overcome these hurdles, government support or private sector financing, to what extent do you have expectations of these? That's the second part, the second round of our panel discussion. And in the last round, Japanese companies, there are businesses represented here. And so going forward, Asia will become very important, in particular Southeast Asia and India. Will be growing going forward, and I believe this is an opportunity, business opportunity for Japan. So in Asia, what kind of businesses are you looking toward, or what kind of financial activities do you look forward to in these areas? So we'd like to start the first round, the introductory round. We'd like to ask the businesses and the banks, renewable energy related businesses. Could you limit yourself to 5 minutes? Use slides to give your presentations. So Panasonic Holdings, Mr. Yukihiro Kaneko first, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kaneko from Panasonic Holdings. Thank you for having me here. I am working on the development of perovskite solar cell. So I am from a field different from finance, so I am not so knowledgeable about I am not an expert in finance, so please understand that. So first, I would like to start out with our founders' words. So it's called the philosophy of the water. In order to make the poverty go away, we need to have the goods abundant so that it would be abundant like water, and it would be cheaper. And so what Panasonic would like to have is the philosophy of water in the green energy. So this is the technology future vision. In the coming decades, we need to have maximization of resource value. So the energy must be generated anywhere, can be used whenever as much as you want, and can be used without creating losses by accommodating each other's needs. So we have various technologies that would be conducive for the maximization of resource value. Not many current Panasonic technologies are included here because this is for the future. various renewable energy initiatives are going on because we are a big company. And the lower right shows the perovskite solar cell. The usage of natural energy is the solar energy is the only energy which can be created from natural source of energy. So we have been focusing on that, and I don't see the last picture. Oh, yes, there is. So perovskite solar cells. What do we do? So I will be skipping the details of the technology, but in the urban areas like this, we want to generate power. There were many customers who would like to generate power in the middle of the city. However, in the middle of the city, you would not be able to put solar panels. But many corporate customers, they are aware that they need to contribute to decarbonization. And perovskite can be used in those urban areas using the windows or walls for power generation. And the power can be generated using the perovskite very close to where the demand is. So this is a new and innovative technology. That will be all from my side. Thank you.
We still have a little more time. And so in the world, in this sector, I have seen different rankings, and Panasonic also always ranks among the top 10 or even top 10. The world ranking is such that you're evaluated very highly. And perovskite solar batteries, is this what it is about? Or could you explain a little more about the battery, please?
Oh, thank you. So this technology was created in Japan. So since early years, we have been working on this. And it is hard to say whether this is our proprietary technology, but our technology is very high level, even globally.
Thank you. Next, turning to Mr. Shunsuke Kawashima from Itochu Corporation, the storage batteries for the grid. That is what we want you to explain. To the transmission and distribution network, there's a dedicated storage battery. So in this area, could you talk about your business?
My name is Kawashima of Itochu. Thank you for having me. I heard that many of you in the audience are in the financial institutions, so I'm using a slide to explain why we need grid-scale batteries based upon energy storage capacity. You are the professionals, and I don't intend to preach to you, but what's power? There's demand and supply for power, and there has to be a balance, and there has to be consistency. And if there is imbalance, blackout shall occur. So that's the major presumption. And when we think about Japanese lifestyle, why is the reason why stable power supply is secured? The TEPCO, KEPCO, the former utilities are balancing demand and supplies. And as indicated in orange, what do they regulate? The volume of power from thermal power plants. If there is high demand, then they will increase supply. And if there is less demand and less supply, for the pumping storage, they would use the pump to pump up the water for hydroelectricity. And then by discharging the water, power is generated, and that kind of technology is used for regulation. And another technology is storage of battery. Storage battery is storing power when the supply is low, and then if there's shortage of supply, then the storage battery is used to provide the supply. And this kind of practice continued for decades, but then the wave has changed because of the necessity to use more renewable energy. This is the target and prediction of the government. On the left-hand side, Strategic Energy Plan has come up with the energy mix. On the other hand, on the right, we describe the forecast for domestic power generation, domestic power supply. So this describes how much demand would grow. First, from the left, in fiscal year 2019, 20% renewable energy, and then for the bar in 2030, it goes to double, around 40%, and then by fiscal 2050 or 2060, it should occupy 50 to 60%. That's the government target. And then fossil fuel, 76%, 2019, and it shrinks. So if you use balancing, coal thermal plants, power generation will shrink. And on the other hand, on the right, 2020-23, the demand is 1 trillion kilowatt per hour. And then the GX Implementation Council has announced this, and it's going to grow to 1.3-fold or 1.5-fold by 2050. Population is going to decline, so power demand should have declined. But because of data center and AI or EVs, because of the penetration of these new technologies, there would be growing demand and supply has to grow. In other words, we have to increase renewable energy and also the regulating, balancing power generating source. The thermal power generation will shrink. So when we introduce renewable, what would be the key? It doesn't emit CO2, so it's clean. No doubt about that. But when we think about balancing demand and supply, there's less control. At what timing, how much power can be generated, that cannot be controlled. On the left, PV daily generation is described. As you can see at the center, 12 o'clock, that's when sunshine is at its peak. On the other hand, the dotted green, demand grows at evening hours. So at the perfect timing, there has to be balance between demand and supply, but there is timing gap. So there has to be grid-scale storage battery in order to regulate or rebalance. And since the 1990s, our company has been engaged in batteries. We have the know-how, we know the market. So we have been injecting our initial investment in this area. That concludes my initial remarks.
Okay,
Thank you for
finally,
that.
I'd like to ask Roger Charles from DBS Bank in Singapore. So as a leading financial institution in Singapore and Asia, I believe that your bank is really actively involved in financing renewable energy. So could you share your business experiences with us?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roger Charles. I am an executive director in the institutional banking group for sustainability team for DBS, based in Singapore. Do we have some of my slides up? So on to the next slide. So just as I said, more of a global perspective from what the bank is seeing, you know, we see the energy transition is critical to addressing the global climate emergency today. What you see on this slide is the share of renewables in global electricity generation. And this has reached around 33%, which is up significantly from a few years ago. But it's also clear that we need to do much more. Asia continues to depend heavily on fossil fuels to meet its energy demand and electricity generation. And despite the increase of the share of renewables in electricity generation in the recent years, due to the increase in overall demand, the dependency on fossil fuels is not reduced to a large extent. In addition to that, we have poor existing networks are some of the major challenges in the context of switching to renewables in the energy in Southeast Asian countries. So on the whole, you know, we need to look at increasing our share of electricity generation, but we also need to ensure that more parts of our global economy are electrified. And this will be mainly in the mobility sector, heating and cooling of buildings. We need to improve on energy efficiency within this system, and we need to also tackle our global food systems and other many things. Next slide, please. So as global investments flow further we need to underline the positive momentum behind climate action. So what we see here is that in 2024, we expect that every dollar invested into fossil fuels, the world will invest $2 into clean energy. And this is up from 1.7 in 2023 and just 1 times just a few years ago. And we believe this is a rising trend and this will continue onwards into 2030. We also see promising signs in Asia, which offers plenty of opportunities. So we take China, for example, where we see astonishing efforts. In 2023, China installed over half the world's total renewable power generation. And we see this increasing up to 60% by 2028. But we've also seen promising signs in other economies, such as India and other countries within Southeast Asia. And we'll highlight this later on in our discussion. Next slide, please. So in terms of our climate strategy as a bank, we are here to achieve a net zero future while recognizing social responsibility to foster. So our priorities are to provide advisory and financial solutions to support our clients within their decarbonization and transition plans. And as part of this, we will forge new partnerships through developing ecosystems, whether that's market-based or sector-based. And then we'll also integrate climate considerations into our risk management. And this is how we not only look at how we finance clients, but also how we finance sectors. And then we manage our operational emissions. And this will be through essentially our net zero targets. So on to the next slide, please. So back in 2021, DBS was the first bank in Singapore to set our net zero targets. So we do this via setting sectoral product coverage. So this is one of the most comprehensive. So we cover 7 different sectors: power, oil and gas, auto, steel, and then we have 2 other sectors there, which is agri and chemicals. And so for these 2, we understand that there is not enough data out there today for us to set targets against these. So we actually have data coverage targets set. But for the other core 7, we see these as our core industries within the markets that we operate. And so therefore, we have set decarbonization targets for these. These decarbonization targets, they follow global pathways. So for example, in power and oil and gas, we will follow the IEA decarbonization pathways. In shipping, we will use the IMO pathways, and in aviation, for example, we'll use IATA as our benchmarks. And so this is really around setting this grounded in science approach, where it needs to be consistent with the global pathways. But in more recent years, we've seen that there's been a divergence from these global pathways, especially in Asian markets. And we need to understand that the energy transition is not going to be consistent across the world and across the globe. Asia still needs to catch up. And so having more regional pathway and looking at Asia from more of a regional perspective, to say that Germany is not the same as India, and India is not the same as Indonesia, and Indonesia is definitely not the same as China.
Okay.
So we do
Roger,
need to take more of a...
Roger, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'd like to hear more, maybe later.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go.
Sorry. We'd like to move to the second round. The 3 panelists have spoken. They've talked about their businesses and finance and renewable energy. And the second round will be on penetration. What are the challenges to penetration? What are the hurdles? And government support, private sector financial support, to what extent is this necessary, and can you expect from the private sector? So first, from Panasonic Holdings, I'd like to ask Mr. Kaneko, you've talked about the perovskite solar battery, and for further penetration of this product, what are the issues, and to what extent can you expect the government to support you?
Thank you for the question. Our perovskite solar cell, it is still under development technologically, inclusive of China. There is a fierce competition for the development of perovskite solar cells. So how to increase the output, how to improve the efficiency. There is a huge competition there. And also the reliability, the life of the solar cell, these are challenges as well. So there is development going on in this area, and this remains to be a challenge. We are working on that ourselves, and our technology is quite good globally. So in the silicon solar cell, the Japanese players had lost the race. So we should not be complacent in terms of the technology, and we need to get the support from the government for the development of technology. So we need to have Japan as one team to support this. When we go to the penetration stage of these products, the solar power generation electricity price has come down because in China now there is dozens of gigawatts are being produced, but at this point we would not be able to win in the price at this point. But as I have explained, we would be able to create a technology where the power generation by solar cells could not be made in the past can be done with perovskite. And so in that sense, perovskite is very environmentally friendly. You don't need a big space, and I think that there should be incentive put there. So rather than destructing the land, we would be able to put in these solar cells, and we would be able to efficiently put the solar cells using perovskite. And right now, we are working on to create the criteria for that, and TNFD, if it could take in these numbers for the disclosure purposes, I think it would be spread more and more. As Mr. Kawashima mentioned from Itochu, the solar power generation is seen at the peak around noon. But if you are able to put the perovskite solar cells at the evening on the west side, there would be a possibility of generating the power during that hour when people need it. So when there is electricity dynamic pricing, it would play a very significant role. And we can talk about this from biodiversity perspective and the balancing of demand and supply perspective. And I think that the global market would be able to accept this, and the investor should invest in it.
Thank you. Solar power generation, in the case of Japan, we have the FIT system, FIT. We've moved to FIP now. There have been, to a certain extent, price support and the consumption increased, and there was the effect of volume production. So in the same way, some kind of subsidy enabling people to buy at a cheaper price. Government support, is that a must?
Yes, I think so. During the introduction period, the incentive is a must, because if we don't have enough volume, the price will not be coming down. So in order to conduct the investment in R&D, the demand should be created, and I think that the subsidies by the government would be conducive to that.
Information disclosure was discussed earlier, and ISSB going forward. I'm sure there are people representing banks here. Bank loans, is there anything that you look for in terms of bank loans?
In disclosing the information, so right now we are in a situation where the companies must be decarbonized. So the financial institutions should be supporting it, and that would be very helpful. So I have participated in the COP last year, and the renewable energy was something that's good to have. And now it's more about what kind of financing that field can get. So the private sector support will be critical.
Financial products as well. There are important technologies that have to be supported through loans. There may be terms of loans which will be developed going forward, and I think that would be good. Thank you. Next, Kawashima-san from Itochu, I'd like to ask the following. The grid-scale batteries, what are the issues which would be problematic in terms of penetration? And what do you look for in government support or private sector support?
Thank you. Is there any subsidy? Yes. We are engaged in some grid-scale battery projects, but there's METI subsidy as well as TMG subsidy. Battery cost is still expensive. There are several challenges, but we do receive subsidies. If we can project the final page of my PowerPoint presentation. What's the revenue model of grid-scale storage battery? At the center, you see the grid system. So imagine that there would be batteries there. There are three sources of revenues. One, the wholesale market. That's the first level. And this is purchasing power when it's cheap and selling when it's expensive. So it's a market. And then on the left-hand side, capacity market, the capacity to generate and supply will be fixed for balancing. And then the balancing market, I talked about the instantaneous demand supply. And in order for frequency to be consistent, there has to be balancing. So these are the three markets where revenues will be generated. So business model is getting profit from the market. So if we have robust markets and the revenue model is well understood, then we think that we will be eligible to receive finance from the private sector. It was only since the beginning of this year where these three markets have become functioning. So it's not well understood in the private sector. But in the West, the revenue model is more established. So we will be able to receive private sector finance. So how should we heighten the leverage in order to minimize equity? That's another key that we would like to think about. And on top of that, with TMG support, TMG fund dedicated to storage batteries has been started up, and some financial institutions have made investments. They are scrutinizing each project and studying the revenue model. And by doing such study, we think that the storage battery business will become more bankable. Thank you.
Thank you. In Japan, there are three markets. So there's a wholesale power and capacity market and the demand-supply adjustment market. And these were launched this year. Several have been formed.
Several had been established, but it was only the beginning of this year that all three began to function. And a track record, we will have to be waiting for the track record to come out. But as long as financial institutions see the profitability, maybe they would be willing to do project finance, then we would be much supported.
In the West, these models are established?
Yes. So they were earlier. So there's several projects with project finance fully provided. So I think that's the future direction for Japan.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so Roger, I like to ask you a question about the challenges related to what hampered the further expansion of renewable energy project and finance in Asia in general. And I talk with a financial regulator in Asia quite often, and in Southeast Asia, there are a lot, a lot of motivation and momentum among financial regulators, but they often tell me that the green bond market is really small because companies are still not willing to issue green bond. So could you describe what the constraint in Asia?
Thank you. I think in terms of from a financial institution perspective, and even from the private sector, I don't think there's any lack of capital ready to be deployed into renewables into Asia. I think one of the biggest constraints that we do see today is that it inhibits the continued growth of clean energy. Is really around infrastructure. So it's where we don't have enough high voltage transmission lines, the grid connectivity, and really then on top of that lowering the cost of storage solutions, it will just continue to remain a challenge. And these can't be overcome by so much the private sector, but this is really around policy to deliver clean power and make electricity more affordable. So really, it's a case of not only did the private sector, we have a number, there's a lot of projects which are being put on hold while policy starts to get sorted out in countries such as, like, say, in Vietnam and say Indonesia, for example. So this is for us one of the biggest challenges to overcome. In terms of financing, we continue to finance where you've got stronger policy in places like, say, India, for example. We're seeing the proliferation. We're seeing like the challenge being stepped up by the private sector to develop more renewables projects, whether it be in solar, whether it be in wind, or even in hybrid projects. We're seeing a lot more starting to come, but we really need to debottleneck the grid to help accelerate the evacuation of clean energy today. And there is this urgent need to mobilize capital for investments in clean energy and also support the phasing out of coal power generation.
Thank you very much. So you mentioned about infrastructure is needed. So this is something that government have to do. And so there's an infrastructure issue related to like transmission line, grid construction, etc. So besides China, which country do you see growing potential in terms of infrastructure development?
So India, we see this where a lot of investment has been put in by, and it's been government mandated. I think in the other regions within Asia, a lot of this infrastructure has historically been sort of put in place using different finance structures, such as blended finance, where we bring in the multilaterals, who bring in the concessionary capital, which then helps de-risk commercial bank lending into that sector, and then we can start to undertake much larger, bigger projects. So we will continue to see how this evolves. We'll see, Japan has been a huge played a huge role in the development of infrastructure within the Southeast Asian economies in the past, and I hope we'll continue to see their involvement in helping not only develop and put in place and to cover this infrastructure that's required, so needed to accelerate the energy transition and the deployment of clean energy within the region, but also to deploy on the technologies which they're also developing through the export credit agencies as well.
Okay, I want to ask you one more question about India. So what enabled India to accelerate this renewable energy-related infrastructure? Is that because India is getting a lot of fund from foreign country, or what's so special about India?
I think when you look at India, when you look at the permitting process, the setting up of PPAs, the SECI, the regulator, has just made it very easy. They've streamlined the process. everything from land acquisition all the way through to getting the permits to then the project development. Also in India, as a mandate, they have now, mandated the manufacture of all of the components for solar. So they've actually set up the whole supply chain within. So not only for just solar, but for wind as well. And also they're now working on electrolyzers so that, India is blessed with all of the natural resources that they need in terms of wind and solar, but also they've got the supply chains there to now not only support the generation of clean energy, but also use this clean energy in where there is no grid connectivity to actually start producing hydrogen and green ammonia and to utilize this. And so where we see a number of projects coming up, not only in India, but also Indonesia, we're seeing offtake agreements being put in place, which essentially makes these projects bankable. To be able to then, and these offtakes are agreements with Japanese companies, and this will be for to support Japan's hydrogen economy. And these are the sort of projects we see as bankable, where we see these offtake agreements in place for like the next 20 years.
Okay, thank you very much. それでは第3ラウンド、最後のラウンド
Going to the third round.
まず日本の事業会社の2社
I'd like to ask the two Japanese companies. Up until now, we've been discussing in the context of Japan, but Asia is where growth is remarkable. And as has been mentioned, Southeast Asia and in India, there are opportunities to expand your business and make inroads there. First, Kaneko-san from Panasonic Holdings. The solar storage batteries is an area where China is predominant. Now, going forward, what is your outlook?
中国っていうのが非常に技術的にも
China, technology-wise, at this point, they are very advanced in the solar power business. We have to think about how we would be able to win the competition over China. The perovskite solar cell is something that was discovered in terms of the technology by Japanese professor. And right now, the 10 times more researchers in China are involved in the research in this area, and they have more investment, significantly more investment in this field. So we need to win in technology, and we have to win in the business, and we have to think about that going forward. And how we compete against China, we need to be competing in a different ground. So the perovskite can be made cheaper than the silicon solar cells, and China is aiming to replace the solar farm, the solar cells. But where we would like to go is the niche market, where the silicon solar cells would not be able to go in. So we need to be dominant in those niche area first. So U.S. is putting tariffs on the solar cells of China, and what's happening is that the silicon solar cell manufacturers, which had died away, is making a comeback. And in Europe, there is a new law, and the supply chain will be confined within the European Union, and India is doing the same thing. So decoupling from the Chinese market is going on. And for Japan, that kind of initiative is hard to take, but when that happens, we need to be able to respond to that situation. We need to have advanced technology which would enable us to compete in that environment. And the solar power generation was either rooftop or the mega solar farm. And going forward, using the perovskite, we would be able to provide different values, and we would be able to have a variety of applications, the variety of locations where when you need it. So I think that there would be more choices, and we should take positions where we are good at.
はい、ありがとうございます。
Thank you for that.
中国はどっちかというと
China
そのシリコンとか
is
大きな太陽光
dealing with the silicon and the large solar power. They're focusing on that. And so maybe Japan can play to its strengths and its uniqueness. From the standpoint of energy security, this is important. And the domestic produced technology, when you say domestically produced technology, where is the boundary? How should we interpret that?
So there are many things. So this is the first technology which has come out from, this is the Japan first technology, and the silicon, the solar cells. The silicon tended to come from China as resources. And the reason why we have lost in the silicon solar cells is because we had to buy silicon at a higher price. So that's why we have lost. On the other hand, perovskite solar cells, the material that needs to be used is very small. You don't need to use silicon. And the iodine which is used, Chile is number one in terms of the resources holding, but Japan is number two. So we believe that having iodine in our own country will be the strength that we would be able to play on. So where we draw the line is very important, but I think that this could be weaponized.
それでは次に
Thank you very much. Kawashima-san from Itochu Cooperation. I'd like to ask the following. In Japan, the grid size batteries, you're working on this now. Are there expectations that you can expand to Asia?
As I said, the business model of grid-scale storage battery is to a certain extent well established. There's no export or import of power, so we have to capture the domestic market and be profitable in that market. That's one target. But penetration of renewable energy is the goal not only for Japan, but for all countries around the world. And if that increases, there would be the demand for storage batteries for the grid. So sales of storage batteries, yes, we're in that business. But on the other hand, if the Southeast Asian markets continue to expand, then there will be the ecosystem for grid-scale batteries to be profitable. Then we can transplant our Japanese business model or the business model we've applied in the West to Southeast Asia. How we can do that and accumulate assets, that will be one theme.
Going forward in Japan, the renewable energy will be on the increase, and there is commercial opportunities in Japan as well, commensurate opportunities. But at the same time, we need to be looking at Asia. Where are you looking at? Which parts?
Of course, Australia is hopeful. We're already taking moves there, but in Southeast Asia, places where we have affinity. In Thailand, there's the huge automotive manufacturing sector, so Thai, Malaysia, or Vietnam. Those are highly potential market, and I think there would be commercial opportunities there. Unfortunately, however, there is a direction of renewable energy, but there is the grid issue. There's a challenge there for development. So as a business model, there are a few negotiations, but there are still several challenges.
Thank you.
Okay, so Roger, so you talked about your financing businesses in Asia, including India. Could you explain more what is the presence of Japanese company in Asia with regards to renewable energy, and then what do you expect from Japanese company? And if you can share other Asian countries' experiences, would you please share with us?
Yeah, so I think learning from the past, Japan has been a strong partner to ASEAN as a whole, and this has been through I guess three broad areas. The first is around public-private partnerships, and using Japanese blended finance models to attract both public and private investments into infrastructure development within the region. So we will want to see this continue. The other one is really around technology transfer. So today we see, say, Singapore, for example. Singapore is in a very unique position. We do not have natural resources. So therefore, we have one of two, 98% of our power comes from natural gas. So we've got two main ways that we're going to decarbonize the Singapore economy. And that's, first of all, through the import of power from renewables from our neighboring countries. The second is to build that resilience and to move from natural gas into hydrogen. And where we've been able to do that pivot and is definitely been through the import of Japanese technologies, especially around gas turbines, which are ready to fire up to 30% hydrogen. This has been also recognized in the Singapore Asia taxonomy of where, as a transition activity, to be able to to build these and to have them in place has already spurred on the whole value chain of hydrogen within Singapore, and we are actually looking to build that value chain within Singapore. I guess when you talk about just outside of Singapore, you can talk about Vietnam, where you have their Power Development Plan 8. And that then also introduces LNG as being a transition fuel. But again, not only these for these LNG to power, the turbines, the PDP8 and the government has mandated that any new gas turbines being put into place there will need to be hydrogen ready as well from the get-go, and they'll need to start co-firing within a certain period. So we do see Japan as being an important partner in terms of the transfer of these technologies to the region as they have in the past. Then thirdly, I guess it's really around joint ventures and establishing joint ventures with Southeast Asian firms to enhance really the local capacity. Whilst Japan has been very advanced in their transition strategy and developing new technologies, I think it's not only about exporting these technologies, but also enhancing the local capacity while leveraging their expertise in renewable technology, such as Panasonic as well, and in battery storage.
Thank you very much.
We started late today, so how much time do we have? Do we have until 40 minutes past? We have 10 minutes remaining, so could we have entertain questions from the floor? Since you are here, and so if you have a burning question, please do ask, and we'll bring over the microphone to you. Please take advantage of this opportunity.
Thank you very much. So my name is Kaneko from Japan Meteorological Association. I would like to ask about perovskite. A little over 10 years ago, this was something that was invented by a professor in Japan, and the overseas players had commercialized it, and it had penetrated into the market. Perovskite is very light, and you would not be using much resources. And another point is that it would not be impacted so much by the weather in its power generation capacity. I think that is the strength of perovskite. So in terms of the Japanese technology, how advanced is it from that perspective? Thank you very much. You mentioned about the weather. Perovskite is heated, and it's very heated, and there's a heated debate about this, and on the web there are many information about this. And so in terms of the solar cells, it is about how much solar power you would be able to convert into electricity. In the case of perovskite, it can be using the room light, and there would be a linear change from the natural lighting to the room lighting. And what happens is that when things go inside the room, the amount of electricity will go down drastically, but depending on what kind of technology that you use, there is a possibility that the electricity generation can be made to a sufficient amount. So conversion efficiency on a usage scale, we were the best, and now China has exceeded us, but we have maintained the world-class level. In the recent days, the Chinese player has mass-produced it, and now it's in the market, and we have bought it, but the performance is not as much as it says in the catalog. So where we would be able to beat is the quality, and once it's installed, you would not be able to have a visibility to how much power is being generated, but by putting in high quality in the product, I think that we would be able to beat the Chinese players. The perovskite, different from semiconductors, because we are making it from liquid, the material would be important, and how it would be dried after it's applied, it would be very important. So it's just like cooking. So everything that's put in is critical. So in that sense, I think that we have superiority over other players. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have much time remaining. I'd like to conclude with regard towards realizing sustainability. Sustainable future powered by renewable energy is the title under which we've discussed. Renewable energy is very important, I think, whether it's creating hydrogen or ammonia. Green is something that people will be looking for. So as much as possible in Japan, to increase renewable energy is important in supporting manufacturing industry in Japan. So grid and transmission lines, infrastructure is something that we need more of, and we need to create more. And we have technology unique to Japan, perovskite batteries and so forth. Perovskite batteries and so forth. We need to play to that to lead us to success. In terms of finance, we hope there'll be support. Development of climate finance, I think, would be good. At the Asian Development Bank, climate finance dialogue is something that I have initiated with Asian financial authorities. We're discussing discussions to create a climate finance market. Southeast Asians are very enthusiastic. It's remarkable. And going forward in Southeast Asia, I believe that renewable energy will be on the increase. Japanese technology to be leveraged in Asia, that's necessary. And we have to look at the world to see how we can market Japanese technology. We need to have that kind of perspective and mindset, and so that targeting globally to develop Japanese technology is something that we need to support. I think this will be very important. Although time was short, we had the two companies representing Japan, and a leading bank in Asia, DBS Bank, has been participating in our panel discussions. We thank them all. With this, I'd like to conclude. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Please give the panelists a warm round of applause, please.